Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad podcast with Chris Finn, a production of P4S Golf. Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad. I'm your host, Chris Finn, and I'm excited today and honored to be joined by another host of an amazing podcast. If you haven't heard about it, you've probably been living under a rock. On the mark, we have Mark Immelman here with us. And for those of you who don't know, he's not just an amazing podcaster. Obviously, you've probably seen him somewhere broadcasting, one of the top players in the world and giving insights into what they're thinking and how they're doing. But for those of you who didn't know, he's also one hell of a player, All-American for 4 years in college, played on the tour. He's also one of the top 10 golf instructors in the state of Georgia. So if you are anywhere around the state of Georgia, good guy to potentially reach out to. But definitely, one of the greats in the game, most notable, as well as on the college coaching side, has been a coach of the year twice. Just all around, very, very knowledgeable in the space. Mark, I am honored to have you on the show, and thanks for joining me today.
Chris, it's my thrill. All I can say listening to all of that is, ain't golf grand? I mean, goodness gracious. We are in this really cool space that's ever evolving. And, it's thanks to golf that I get to talk to people like you. So I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. And so tell it for any listeners who maybe don't know how you've gotten to where you've gotten to, just how did you get into golf and how did you then go from being a player to a coach? And, obviously, very well known now in the broadcasting and entertainment space, just because of all the expertise that you gained. Like, how did that journey happen?
Purely accidental and largely serendipitous, I would say. Growing up in South Africa, I was just like any young kid. Played a number of sports. We're very outdoorsy over there. So I played cricket and tennis in the summer, and I played rugby in the winter. And I've never been the biggest guy in the world. And so one rugby match, I got badly injured. I got my wrist broken, and I had to be. It took a procedure to get it reset. And so I just remember lying there on the gurney, ready to go into the operating theater. And my coach came and visited, and he said to my parents, and me in my groggy state, I got this. He was like, look, Mark's too small to play rugby. We're not going to do this sort of stuff anymore. And so, and look, thankfully I excelled in other sports too. And then coming back from the injury the one Saturday morning, after I came out of the cast and stuff, my buddies were going to the golf course. Mm-hmm. Not sure why. And so they're like, come join me. And so I looked at my dad and he said, by all means, there's an old set of clubs in the garage. I was left-handed. They were right-handed. That was the conundrum. And so I went and the proverbial bug bit. And so golf sort of stuck. Then I have a younger brother. You might have heard of him, Trevor. And he's 9 years my junior. So at that stage, I was about 14. So he was 5-ish. And my mom quickly figured that this is a great way for babysitting, especially during the summer.
Sounds like a brilliant woman.
She is. So Trev would tag along to the golf course with us, and, playing with teenage boys, he got good very quick, almost like necessity is the mother of invention kind of thing.
Yeah.
And just by pure athleticism, I guess I got good and started winning some and made my, in South Africa, provincial team and played at the national championships and stuff. And it just largely progressed from there and got to college eventually. And then college went well. And then I turned professional after college, after being the All-American, winning tournaments and stuff. And I turned pro. And so quickly I realized that, hold on a second, if I want to be the best golfer in the world, and that's my goal, I can't even beat my household consistently because my younger brother was pipping me at the time. And this was an unwelcome, yet I'm thankful for it, dose of realism. And so I gravitated to coaching and teaching. And my dad told me, looking back, that apparently when I was a kid, I said I wanted to be a teacher. And so here we are. Oh, really? I get to teach a game that I love, and moved yet. Then I was teaching full time on the European tour. And my old college coach called me up and he's like, the golf coaching job's going, we'd love you to interview. And it was a way for me to, and then fiance, to get to the United States. Mm-hmm. because it's not as easy as they make it sound on the news.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So I interviewed, they offered me the job, and we moved over here to Columbus, Georgia in 2001. And heck, I'm still here. But it just, the whole thing just morphed into a place where I did some guest announcing one time over in South Africa, and someone realized I had a bit of a flair for it because I brought a different angle. And then looking back on it now, Chris, I fell into radio, and from radio became PGA Tour Live. And then the folks at CBS heard me there, and now I'm with them. But looking back at all those days, giving hundreds of lessons in the Georgia summertime, I realized that was kind of my experience, where it was my wilderness time, if you will. And it got me, it taught me to see the game differently, see it as an instructor / coach, but also realize that when you're communicating with people, it's more than just calling, balls and strikes kind of thing. And so it afforded me a different sort of a perspective, which thankfully is the lane I walk in my current broadcast career. So that's kind of the short story. The podcast and all that sort of stuff came as an offshoot of that, but it's all been very. I've lived a blessed existence. I mean, goodness gracious, golf has afforded me a lot of stuff, and I get a voice now, strangely, because I'm sort of known. When I was striving as a golf teacher to be the number one guy, I was good. I taught a number of really good players, but I was never the magazine cover guy.
Yeah. 100%.
So now all of a sudden, now that I have a microphone in front of my face, people want my opinion. So it's kind of weird, but it's really
funny how that works.
Yeah, it's weird and cool, and looking back, I wouldn't have it any other way.
And we've had a number of great instructors on, and that is a common theme that I've seen, and even other coaches in the fitness space, or there is a certain definite commonality between. In one of the episodes, we talked about how in the social media world today, you coach one player and immediately some guy is the top guy. And then you look, a year and a half later and they don't exist anymore. But the true coaches, and is one of the big questions we get from listeners and people listening right now is, how do I find the right coach? How do I find somebody who actually knows what the heck they're talking about? And we get that both in the fitness space as well as in the instructional space. And one of the things that we always talk about, you talked about the hot summer days of coaching, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of golfers, probably thousands. And it's that you can't replace experience. You can't speed it up, right? An hour lesson takes an hour, and you got to do over and over and over. And to your point, I think that's one of the great things I love about listening when you're on with the radio or TV and just listen to you commentate or the pod, is those perspectives, and those clearly come. And I think for those of you listening, when you're looking at coaches and when you think about the people you truly do enjoy talking about the game and analyzing the game, it's because of those many pounds of sweat lost in the sun coaching and learning what actually works for people.
Well, it's interesting you say that and you observe that, because the origin of my podcast, because when the tour came to me, the PGA Tour, and said to me, we want you to do the show. And it was like a magazine recap show. Yeah. And after a few weeks of getting 0 downloads kind of thing, I was like, oh, man, this is not my lane. So without their blessing, I just turned it into golf instruction. And I called up coaches and players I knew and asked them on. And quickly I realized that everyone's wanting to get better. And it occurred to me in a moment of clarity where I was like, I was that kid growing up in South Africa who didn't have a coach, didn't have access to the Golf Channel, got magazines sporadically. I read voraciously to learn, but I never had access to these great coaches.
Yep.
So reading books I could, and then I was like, but hold on a second. I have the opportunity with this podcast to introduce people around the world, kids like me, couldn't get to coaches, to bright minds. Yeah. And then I was like, well, cool. And now I've got it giving away for the young aspirant coach. I think of a young Chris Finn before he became a behemoth in the fitness industry, to shine a bright light on a bright mind as well. And so it was almost double timing everything. And the people that were winning from all of this were the folks that were just looking for good information. And
Yeah,
so
well,
when you look at
100%.
coaches, I'm happy to say that my show, and yours to a large extent as well, is just bringing an all-encompassing sort of a viewpoint as to golf improvement. And that's why I feature teachers and players and fitness experts and psychologists. And we've had, neurosurgeons on here before too, because we're such holistic beings. And you're right, finding the right coach is difficult, but I hope that by way of what you and I do, we're opening up the lines of communication a bit more so folks can get access to people and realize, like, okay, who fits the bill when it comes to me understanding what I'm trying to do.
100%. And I think one of my favorite parts of my learning experience coming into the industry was, I didn't play golf until after grad school, picked it up and started a business. And I quickly realized I wasn't a good employee, so I had to figure out something. So I got the bug a little later in life than you did. But part of starting the business, nobody knew who the heck I was. And I went around to every single golf coach at every single golf club in the area. And I basically said, hey, I'll show you what I do. You show me what you do. And by way of that, I probably got, 30 to 40 different lessons from 30 to 40 different guys. And it very quickly to me became very clearly evident. Not all golf coaches were created equal, because I'm pretty sure I showed up with the same terrible habits and swing to every single lesson, and everybody had a different thing. And it blew my mind. Fast forward now, 15 years later, and talking to guys like yourself and just people who are truly at the top of the instructional side of. It's one of my what I would call soapbox moments is really getting people to understand, hey, you got to find somebody who actually knows what they're doing, who's actually put in the 10,000 hours to understand how to help you personally, and not just teach the same thing to every single person. And hopefully it works for you. Yeah,
you're preaching there. For a while, maybe when I was younger and a little more vigorous, I took offense, but I was bothered by the number of folks that would buy launch monitor, just hang out coaching shingle kind of thing. And a lot of us are failed players. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, well, the next best thing's to teach. And so you have this technology at your disposal, and you're basically just plugging and playing. And that to me ruins more golfers than anything else. I can look at data. I could come to your office and look at some data and try and make some educated guess, well, not educated guess. So you're right. There was a proliferation of golf instructors, and then the advent of social media gave them a loud voice, right? Yeah. And you just have to say the right thing at the right time, and all of a sudden you've got a massive following. Yeah. And so, look, more power to them, because as long as if a person's truly trying to help someone, then I admire you. Yeah. But folks have to be very careful when it comes to information, because, like, when I write articles or when I do podcasts or whatever, somewhere in the back of my mind, there's this voice that goes, hey, careful. First off, don't screw up talent. And then be very careful, because my message is only as good as what it's understood. And I could be well-meaning, but if it's misunderstood, then I'm really ruining someone. 100%. And I'm costing them money. I'm bringing them I'm ruining the joy of our great game. And so there's a responsibility to be had here that I was kind of a little uppity about at one stage, and I still am to a certain extent. But people searching out teachers have to be smart, and people teaching. The onus is on us to be true to our craft, and to be prepared to say, you know what, I don't know. If you really don't know, don't guess. Rather send someone somewhere else, because they're investing their hard-earned dollars in this. They have goals, they have dreams, aspirations, that sort of stuff. And the coach shouldn't be the one ruining that thing. He or she shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite parallels of golf instruction and golf fitness or rehab, physical therapy, physio, whatever, is what you just said struck the number of times I've told somebody, hey, I can give you the greatest program in the world, but if I can't figure out how to get you to do it, it's a terrible program. It based on data, whatever, it could look great, but if I can't connect with you as a coach and understand what you actually need and which order to do it, and I can't tell you the number of people who in the fitness space come in and they say, hey, I want to get better physically, and you have to really say, well, how much are you working out now? And they're like, well, I don't do anything. And they're like, I want to go 7 days a week. Hey, I'm just going to tell you, let's start with 15 minutes, 5 days a week, and let's see if we can make some little wins there, and then we'll talk about snowballing more. Because if I give you 7 days a week, you're going to start missing days, get demotivated, then you get into the whole psychology of coaching. But I think what I'd love to hear, Mark, is obviously you've been around the game in many facets for a long time. On the physical side, like how have you seen that evolve in terms of what the great players or great coaches, whether I guess two-part. What have the great players, what did they used to do versus how has that evolved to this day? And then obviously the great coaches, like how have the great coaches evolved along with that as there's been more science and research and kind of evidence that's come out?
Really good question. I will start with a hero of mine and fortunately a mentor in Gary Player, who was well before his time. When he is a young man, said to me, he came over to the States and Gary's a small guy. Yeah. And he's like, Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer were big and they were strong and they hit the ball far. And so I realized that I had to get stronger. And, to look at the guy now, he's 87? I don't know. He's not his age, that's for certain.
No, not at all.
And he said to me, he goes, it proved me right. It proved to me that eating right, working out, being strong, being healthy, just overall well-being has extended my capacity to not just, enjoy a fruitful life, but to be able to play golf still. If you watch him still, the guy he's ever green on the golf course. 100%. So I would say that, as you watch the industry now, maybe they're just catching up with Gary Player because he was the outlier back then on the tour. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now Gary Player is the normal on tour. 100%. At the highest level, I'm sorry, you cannot compete with the world's best unless you're strong, healthy, mobile, all the stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess you could, but you're not going to be very consistent, and you're going to be, spotting strokes to people. And to me, as a former instructor to elite golfers, you're always just trying to find some sort of an edge or a separator. And if you're not working out, you are giving up strokes. That's a negative separator to me. So in terms of the development, it's wide ranging now. In terms of the development of the industry, you could talk to me better than I could, but just from kind of the layman's viewpoint, movement has gone more from like just lifting heavy weights back in the day. Mm-hmm. Now it's a lot more speed, mobile, dexterity, all that sort of stuff, dynamic movement kind of deal. And with the advent of what you guys do in like golf specific fitness and that sort of thing, that's a huge growth in the industry as well. And I would almost say now there's a new frontier that's beginning to happen that was there also, but now it's beginning to be respected more, where people have realized that, okay, here's me, I'm a golf guy, and now I get in shape, fantastic. But, then I'm an overall being too. And now the mental emotion and the emotional aspect of it all, that's being dealt with too. So it's uncanny how this view of the golfer is this entire being, as opposed to just an individual with a golf club in his or her hand, has changed. And it's fun to watch. I'll tell you what, I listen. I'm an avid listener to guys like you, because I just take this going, golly, if someone comes for a lesson with me, I might have grand intention, but if they can't do this, to your thing, like they can't do it in terms of time. If they can't just perform the move because they're not mobile or flexible enough or strong enough, then my words are empty, honestly. And I'm giving them a challenge they can't pull off. So I would almost say to any aspirant golfer, it's mandatory. Not to say you get in there and you get like Victor Hovland or someone in the gym. But you just get moving and you get mobile and that sort of stuff, and you hook up with someone like you, and you start to identify that area of the game, because it will make golf easier, and most importantly, it'll make you more injury averse. Like all of us golfers who are traveling internationally a bunch, that wears you out. It really takes its toll on the body. And Gary still flies millions of miles a year. He pops off an airplane looking like he's a sprightly young virile man. It's crazy.
Like he just woke up 10 hours sleeping in his own bed.
Yeah, and when he sees me, he's like, "Oh, Mark," he grabs me on my side. He goes, "Little flabby there, my boy." So it's never ending, and I'm a big advocate of it, and I challenge everyone to start moving at least.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I probably started, I guess about 15 years ago is when I had started I had my little shed on a little driving range, and I had a little trifold sign. I joke now, it's $99 for an evaluation and 3 sessions. Like I was literally giving it away. I couldn't get anybody to work with me. And they'd come up and it's funny. I sound like the old guy now talking to my team.
You are.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. And he goes to me, they'll say, "Man, it's hard to get people to buy in." I say, "Man, you have it easy." When I started, they didn't even know what the heck golf fitness was. They'd be like, "What are you doing?" So not only did I have to try to convince them that, hey, and show them, hey, your hip doesn't move or your shoulder doesn't move, whatever it may be. But it was also like, hey, they don't even know what the heck golf fitness is. And I think what's been cool for me is over the last decade, I feel like the amateur population has caught up and at least is aware of, oh, that is something that we should do. And I think now really to me, the next generation is to what you just said, is understanding that your golf lesson or going and working with a pro becomes multitudes more beneficial when your body can actually do what they want you to do and what they need you to do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's been a really cool evolution for me, just from the inside of, where people didn't even know what the heck I was doing. So it was kind of a twofold convincing them to let me help them, to now that people at least know what it is and they accept, oh, that's probably something to do. But, there is still that awareness of, I maybe don't know what I should do, or, it's been very cool.
I'm glad you say that, because, I'm older than you and I have the benefit of hindsight. And I would call myself, I came from the Sony Handycam era of golf instructors. Yeah. You'd see us coming. We'd show up at the range with this little bag over our shoulder and our little Sony Handycam. Yeah. And all the golf swing footage we had assembled was if we're lucky enough to video Tiger or Ernie or one of these.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of compare people, right? Mm-hmm. And now this has evolved into technology, and you could basically measure almost everything. Yeah. But everyone back then operated in silos because information was just so valuable. You're like, I know a secret kind of thing, and I don't know.
Exactly.
This is my thing. But now the industries are just, the lines are getting blurred. Mm-hmm. And any golf instructor worth his or her salt is going to consult with somebody like you for an assessment before they go. Otherwise, you're kind of throwing, stuff into the wind. And then you're making not long-ranging change, and so I'm finding the whole industry is kind of, the lines are getting blurred a little bit more, because, how the thing is, if all you have in your tool belt is a hammer, everything in the world's going to become a nail.
Everything's a nail.
And I find golf instructors still that way. And sadly, I find some fitness people that way too. But when you start to learn about everything, and that's why I'm thankful for my podcast, man, I've heard it all. And I can't tell you, I was a holistic guy starting this. I've become even more so. I mean, I will say categorically, and I will sit on a board or a council or whoever with a number of golf teachers, and I'll say to them, I'm like, changing a dude's golf swing is the intellectually lazy way of getting him to improve.
100%.
There's just more to it than that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And it's just always so interesting to me, you talking about the lines blurring it's funny because you'll see I see some people in the fitness world trying to do it all. You still see people trying to, to your point, the Handycam, oh, I know all this stuff. And so I have everything. I'm the one-stop shop, and I can, and people really, and you see it on both sides. And I think the important thing that I always try to, I think impart on the listeners is, like, you need the team. The team is, you want somebody who is the expert in the swing, but also understands enough of the body and the mental, but also you want the expert in the mental who understands enough. And that's what I always preach to our guys that, on our team here is, look, you need to understand the golf swing. We had an education yesterday for all of our coaches, and we're looking at a swing, and of one of a client that sent it in, and his lead elbow's like popping out, like before his club even clears through. Right. I said, look, you don't need to understand what that technically occurred, but you need to understand that's not efficient. and then our job on the physical side is, does he have the lead hip rotation, the trunk rotation, and the lead arm rotation to not do that? And the answer in this case was yes. And so then the question is, the education for our guys is, well, have you connected with their instructor? Because physically, there's no reason, when we looked at his testing, it was, hey, when he started 6 months ago, he had to do that because he couldn't move. But now physically, you've fixed his inability to move. So now it's just a bad habit, right? And now at this point, now the instructor can have a heyday. They can do whatever the heck he wants. You can say, hey, green light. Yeah. Physically, they're good. And I think that's so important for people to hear, is there's different elements at play, and you sometimes need a different person. A really great coaches, to me, on all sides, understand the elements to identify, hey, that may be a problem, but they don't necessarily try to fix everything themselves.
So true. And I mean, people might have thought, if they were truly listening earlier, that I was crazy when I said you have to be kind of brave enough and certainly have a small enough ego to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you talk about there. Someone's got to be able to say, well, this is happening. I think there's more to it than just the visuals of it. I don't know. So this is where I seek out a fitness person, or I seek out whoever the case might be, so we can make sure that there's nothing underlying that's actually causing that. And I'm not just trying to sort of bend or break some guy into some position because of that, what he's doing is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see it. Yeah. We see it all the time, whether it's equipment or, we'll see guys where physical metrics, like say, hey, physically, you should be able to swing 10 miles an hour faster. And you can't. Like, this is nothing physical at this point. Like, hey, let's get you with a golf pro, or maybe, you're screwing up on the golf course, but you're a great range player, or just in a friendly game. Well, let's talk to who's the mental person that we can connect with. And I think that's so important for everybody to hear, that when you're looking for really that great coach or that great team around you, it truly is a team. And I love what you said. To me, one of the most powerful and telling signs of somebody is when they're confident enough to say, I don't know. I know it's not right, but I don't know necessarily the best way to fix it. And that's, to me, I've never said that to a player and had a negative response. It's always been like, oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, who do we go to, right? And it just further deepens your relationship with the student at that point.
Mm-hmm. Builds trust. If you can honestly be, like I say, courageous enough to look at someone and say, I'm not sure, people trust you more. Mm-hmm. Because look, everyone who goes for a lesson, the analogy I would draw would be like, okay, it's the baseball player on first base, who by definition is successful, but now he wants to get to second, and he's getting the signal to go and try and steal second, but there's safety in first. And every person who comes for a lesson, they've gotten to a certain level, and there is an element of risk involved to go to a lesson. I don't care who you are, because you're venturing into a somewhat unknown place. And so you're like, then this is the mental aspect of it, to say, okay, I'm placing my complete trust in this person to say, I'm going to leave first base on my way to something better. And I'm not going to, there's not too much risk involved. Mm-hmm. And that's where, if you look at a person, you're like, well, I'm not sure, they'll go like, okay, yes, I'm on board with this guy, because he's not just saying, oh, just go and do it. Everything will be, sunshine, lollipops at the end of the journey.
Yeah. And I think when to hear somebody say, you know what, I'm not sure, but we're going to find out together. We're going to figure, I know where to look, but and I think that to me is probably one of the most reassuring things you can hear from a coach. But Mark, I know you have a book coming out, and so I'd love for you to talk a little, tell us, everyone listening and myself, I've read some of the teasers. I've seen little bits of, but for everyone listening who maybe has not heard, like what's the book about, and what do people have to look forward to?
I, Chris, have just been, like I say, lived a very fortunate life. And through the show of mine, and through my career as an instructor, now a broadcaster, I get to talk to super great minds, outstanding minds in the industry daily. And my book is called Lessons from the Best. And the byline is holistic tips and tricks to help you elevate your game, or something to that effect. It's just a culmination of some of the best stuff I've heard on the Mark podcast.
Yeah.
And it's PGA Tour players, everyone from Victor Hovland to Jordan Spieth. It's some of the great golf instructors like Butch Harmon and David Ledbetter, and it's There's some fitness folks in there. You didn't make it, sadly, but in the next one, definitely. And each chapter is basically a summary, well, not a summary. It's drawing nuggets of wisdom from each show. And all I do is I elaborate on them because, as you know, with a show like this, time is your enemy. Yeah. You could get into something and then you start mining that, and there's just so much that you can be talked about. Mm-hmm. So I've just looked at this and I've taken all these nuggets in each chapter and I just elaborate on them because the goal is to help the golfer from the top of his head to the soles of his feet.
Yeah.
And to say, look, we're going to hit you with some mental stuff, some emotional stuff, some physical stuff. And you're hearing it from the best, with Mark just kind of coloring between the lines a little bit. And so that's what it is. So I'm very excited about it. I'm glad the publisher was. And I've found that as it's been written, it's almost grown. And I'm loving the fact that the publisher is almost the impetus for this, because when you uncover something, it's like he is reading this like a golf guy goes, yeah, but what about this? Let's talk about this a little bit. And so it's nearly there, and I'm excited about it.
That's awesome. So, what's the release date? Where can people kind of get more information or kind of follow to when they can grab a copy of this?
Well, folks can get more information just by following me, I guess, on social. And the release date is scheduled for Masters Month. I say month because the Masters is coming up. It's very special to the entire golfing world.
Yeah.
It's super special to me and my family. And so not to kind of like crib on the Masters thing, but it'll be released shortly thereafter, just while there's still a celebration of springtime and everything's new and fresh. And we got our first major champion of the year. And so it'll be towards, I shouldn't date this because it's a podcast, but towards the end of April 2024. That's the date.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure definitely to have all of the notes and everything into the show notes for all the listeners, so they can make sure they grab a copy and follow you. What's the best platform? Obviously, On the Mark, the podcast is definitely a must listen. On social, or where's the best places you're most active for people?
For an old guy, I'm kind of everywhere. Instagram, Twitter, X, I should say, is at Mark_Immelman. Yeah, I'm TikToking as well. Just search for Mark Immelman there. And I have a YouTube channel that's growing pretty quickly. You can find the visuals of the podcast there and some golf tips and stuff. Just search and subscribe to Mark Immelman. And then I have a website, which is markimmelman.com. So basically my name, wherever you go, and you'll find me.
So if you can't find him, then you have a bigger problem. So he is everywhere. Definitely go, give him follows, subscribe. Mark is one of the best in the game and in the industry. And I'm definitely going to be first on that list, or as close to first as I can before that book comes out. I'm excited to read that. So, Mark, thank you so much for hanging out with today on the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad. And it really, I think, tons of nuggets here for the listeners, and appreciate you being on.
If I shouldn't be stealing your closing podcast thunder. I know as a podcaster, but I want to say this, Chris, it's because of guys like you that my podcast gets to thrive like it does. And in the acknowledgements, I recognize all the hundreds of guests we've had that have been prepared to join and share their time and their insights and their experiences. You talked about that sort of stuff. So thank you for what you do in the industry, and thank you for making something that I do a whole lot better too.
My pleasure. So it's been awesome having you on, Mark, and we'll look forward to hopefully having you on, I'm sure, sometime again soon.
Look forward to it.